just do this right. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Hope you had a good weekend. We are going to pick up with our study of Ashrei. We have been chugging along ever so slowly, but it is a long parak of Tehilim, Kuf Mem Hey, 145. We have spent a good bit of time doing an introduction, and now we have worked our way, as we know, it was written alphabetically, so we've worked our way through the first 8 letters. And today we're going to pick up and start with the letter Tet. I wanted to just begin the class today by sharing an interesting medrash that I found. I think I actually found it before the last class, but I didn't share it then. Just something interesting. It's called the Aleph Beta de Rabbi Akiva. I'd never seen it before, just an interesting medrash that I came across that talks about how when Hashem decided he was going to create the world, so it seemed like he had already created the Aleph Bet. And in this conversation that Rabbi Akiva records in his Midrash, he starts with the letter Taf, and he describes in this Medrash to Rabbi Akiva, he describes how each letter of the alphabet, of the Aleph Bet, sort of jumped off the crown of Hashem, whatever that means, and stood in front of him and demanded, Hashem, I want you to create the world with me, meaning I want to be the first letter. And it's the making of a great children's story, because with each and every letter, there's a reason why they think they're deserving. Taf says, well, you gave the Torah tziva lanu Moshe, at the Taf, it should be me. And Hashem says, Oy, I'm sorry, I can't give it with you because, and then he records in the Medrash a couple of psukim where Taf begins a difficult situation, like a time where the Jewish people did something wrong, or a time when the world, when nature sort of went awry. So in every letter, Taf, Shin, Resh, Kuf, and it goes all the way until he gets to the letter Bet. And of course, by the time we get to the letter Bet, then Hashem says, you're the one I've been waiting for. There are probably so many lessons to learn. I just found it very charming and very sweet the way that it was written. I'm sure it's very deep and mystical and Kabbalistic and much more profound than I was able to take from it. But those midrashim are always, aside from just being so engaging, because there's this back and forth conversation between something like a letter of the Aleph Bet and Hashem himself, there's just something so innocent about how each one thinks like, oh, it's going to be me. It's going to be me. I know it's going to be me. And then Hashem, very gently just explains why this is not, I have other things you're going to do. You're not going to be the one that I start the world with, but you're going to do all these other great things. There'll be all these other great psukim for you. And it's just, it reminds me, it's not just a great lesson for children, it's a great lesson for us adults as well, that, there are plenty of ways that we're each going to contribute. We might have wanted to contribute in a particular way. We might each want Hashem to begin the creation with us, or, have a specific way that we want to contribute. It doesn't always work that way. Hashem, he may only choose one for each particular task, but it was just something sweet. So I happened to have come across it in preparing the letter Tet. And so it came into my mind. I thought that was just a sweet way to start our study of Ashrei today. Okay. So the letter Tet, Tov Hashem Lakol. I'm going to share my screen actually with you. Here it is. Okay. Tov Hashem Lakol. Let me get it this way. Okay. Here we are. All right. Hopefully that's visible for everybody. Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. Right? Hashem is Tov. And he's not just Tov. He's not just good, which is, one of the first words that a person learns when they learn the Hebrew language. He's not just Tov. He's Tov lakol. He's Tov to everyone. V'rachamav, and his mercy, his compassion, al kol ma'asav, on all of his creations, on all of his works. Now, one thing that I want to point out that I think I neglected to point out last time is that we are going to see this word kol very often, but maybe this is the first place. Oh, okay, then I'm glad I didn't point it out yet. Okay, it begins with this pasuk. In this pasuk, which begins with the letter Tet, we're going to be introduced to this word kol. And the word kol is going to appear throughout the rest of the parak, I believe until the very end, if I'm not mistaken, almost in every pasuk. And the word kol in the world of Kabbalah is very significant, as I have confessed, I have no understanding of Kabbalah at all. Every once in a while, there's an idea that's been broken down enough that I can understand it. I'm still working on really being able to understand what exactly the word kol encompasses. But hopefully by the time we get to the end of Ashrei, I'll have something meaningful to share with you, something that I've been able to understand and properly give over. But just keep in mind, you'll notice as you say Ashrei, and certainly as we're studying the parak now together, that the word kol is everywhere, which is funny because it means all, right? It's this all-encompassing word, and it literally appears throughout the rest of the parak. So that's something to pay attention to. In this pasuk, it appears twice. Okay, so let's begin. Tov, Hashem is good. The first thing we notice is that this is describing the way that Hashem behaves, the way he conducts himself. And of course, we've been saying all along, it's much easier to describe behavior, the manifestation of Hashem, than it is to describe him himself. So when we say Hashem is Tov, that's already like a description, right? And that's all, we know that that's something that's not so simple to say. So what does it mean to say that Hashem is good? So the first thing that we notice is that what the Tehilim does not say is it doesn't say that he is Meitiv. We know that he's that also, but Meitiv, first of all, it wouldn't fit in with the alphabet, but Meitiv implies something slightly different. And this is from someone that I saw, Maharan Shvib. I don't really know how else to say that name. I saw it only in Hebrew with no vowels. And what he says is just fascinating, that for so many of us, we know that Hashem, he only wants to do good for us, right? We've said that before, that idea that Hashem is only looking to give. He's not looking to catch us. He's not looking to get us. He's only looking to give to us. But just so often our perception of what we are being given is not always positive. It doesn't always feel good. And this idea that it says Tov Hashem lakol really highlights that same point, that Hashem is inherent goodness. And normally we would say good is a subjective term, right? I thought dinner last night was good, but not everyone in my house agreed with me, right? We would say good is not necessarily something that has any level of objectivity to it. But when it comes to Hashem himself, what we are saying is his essence is good. There isn't anything else. That's just who he is. Now, if the pasuk had said Meitiv, then that would have implied that we always perceive it as good. He's always perceived as good by all of us, but we know that that is just not accurate, unfortunately. So this pasuk is really here. When we say this pasuk, what we can have in mind is Tov Hashem lakol. I recognize that Hashem is good. He is goodness. And even when I don't perceive it as such, he is the epitome of goodness. He personifies Tov, he personifies goodness. And this idea of being good to all, which again, this idea of kol is something that is going to keep coming up in Ashrei. So this idea of kol here implies that Hashem's not just good to the people who deserve it. And he's not just good to the people who have connections, right? It doesn't matter whether you have protectia or not. Hashem is good to all, whether they are, from the right family or living in the right community. His goodness is just what it is, and it's accessible. It's going to be given to everyone. And this, of course, is going to be one of the ways that we distinguish Hashem from all other kings. And this idea is going to keep repeating itself as well, that Hashem is unlimited. And he is, we'll say, like, unimpressed. He is not somebody who distinguishes. He is not somebody with prejudice or who can be sweet-talked into something. It doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. It's Tov Hashem lakol. Some of the Mefarshim, I believe it's the Radak, understand lakol to refer not just to human beings, but to the animal kingdom as well. And this is an idea that also is picked up on. It's really the Radak, I think, throughout all of the psukim, where every time he sees the lakol, some Mefarshim say this comes to include all of humanity, right? Don't just think these are psukim and these are ideas that just talk about the Jewish people. This is a very open, worldly, accepting and welcoming of all. This includes everyone is part of Hashem's creations. And so this idea of kol, this like massive expansiveness, is really meant to include all of humanity. And the Radak adds, it's not just humanity, it's the animals as well. And he includes, as do some more modern day Mefarshim, this is one of the sources that is used in a number of places where we learn Halacha, where we learn Jewish law regarding our behavior. That in the same way that Hashem is Tov Lakol, and we know that we have a responsibility to mimic Hashem in all of the ways that we possibly can. So here is like the all-encompassing example of what does that look like. Tov Hashem Lakol means Hashem is good to all. He doesn't discriminate. So in a situation where a person might say, but that person doesn't live in my neighborhood, or I'm not familiar with those people, or, I'm in a parking lot and there's a stranger and I see that they left their car door open. Tov Hashem Lakol says to me, in the same way that Hashem would be good to this perfect stranger, and I have no idea who they are, what their background is, or what level they are deserving. So I also have to be good, and I have to call out to them and say, excuse me, I think you left your car door open. I thought of that example today because I left my car door open in the parking lot at Hebrew Academy. And the person didn't tell me until I was all the way in the school to go back to the parking lot. So it was just, in my mind that's something we can do, whether it's someone we know or someone who is a perfect stranger, right? There are always opportunities to show goodness, to be good, to have that same level of access to goodness for all of humanity. And it doesn't matter, obviously, whether it's someone we know or someone we don't know. And again, this is expressed in actual halachic practice to the degree that, as it says here in the Rambam Halchot Melachim, right? This applies afilu ha'akum. This applies even to the nations of the world. Now, this is not just nations of the world. He specifically says akum is Rashi Tevot. It's an acronym for avodat kochavim, right? So this applies even to idol worshipers, which we essentially don't interact with on a daily basis. Maybe even your whole life, you would never run into an idol worshiper. But we recognize that in Jewish law, they're at if we could say lowest level of moral standing, right? Not that we're the ones to pass judgment, but if people are ascribing to idol worship, it means inherently their ethical and moral code is very lacking. At least that was the understanding, certainly during the time of the Rambam. And if that's the case, it's beyond fascinating that this is what the Rambam says as halacha, right? Therefore, the Chachamim have commanded us, levaker cholehem, you have to visit their sick, v'likbor meitehem meitei Yisrael. You have to bury their dead just the way that you would bury a Jewish person who died. Lefarnes anihem, and you have to give money to their poor, just like you have to support your bichlal aniyei Yisrael, just like you would support Jews of your own people. Mipnei darkei shalom, right? We do this because we're promoting peace. And so that's the Rambam's explanation. And of course, what is his source? It's our pasuk here. Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. And then I wanted to make sure to include this last pasuk that he also quotes from Mishlei, of course, written by Shlomo HaMelech, the son of David HaMelech. Same idea, but just really expressed differently, of drachaha darchei noam v'chol netivotah shalom, that all the ways of the Torah are pleasant, all its paths are of peace. This idea is quoted very often, but I think it's something we need to keep foremost in our minds, right? Hashem is good to all, and the Torah is meant to be pleasant, right? So when, God forbid, a person's keeping of the Torah either makes them unpleasant or causes, God forbid, unpleasantness, then something is wrong. This doesn't mean that keeping all the mitzvot it doesn't mean it's easy, right? Easy and pleasant don't always have to go together. Something could be hard and still be pleasant, meaning that it's not a source of stress. It's not a source of strife, most importantly. That's the goal. And so here the Rambam brings these two psukim as his proofs, as examples of how we know that we are supposed to interact with every human being that we have the opportunity to interact with a smile on our face, with a sense of goodness in our efforts to be exactly the way Hashem is, Tov Hashem Lakol. Okay. I also just wanted to remind everyone, because I'm sure you're familiar with this Gemara as well, the famous Gemara in Brachot, where Rabbi Akiva is quoted as having said, Kol da'avid rachmana letav avid, right? This tells us that everything that Hashem does, Kol da'avid rachmana, Rachmana refers to Hashem, so all that he works, meaning all that he does, letav avid, it's good. It's inherent goodness. And this is really not something that I think is so simple for all of us to get to a place where we believe this and we ascribe to this, but this is the goal, right? That we get to a point where we say, even though this hurts, even though this is hard, even though I'm so tired of this situation, I know that everything Hashem does is good. It would be nice if I felt it as good and if I experienced it as good. But intellectually, at least, I know that whatever Hashem does is inherently good. The idea of Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. So in the same way that Hashem is good to all and Hashem has mercy, compassion on all his creations, so too we have the same obligation to interact with people. We saw the examples of the Rambam, of giving tzedakah, of caring for the sick, of burying the dead, that it's to be a mensch in all of our interactions. Okay, so that is Tov Hashem lakol. All right, so let's go on to the next pasuk. Yoducha Hashem kol ma'asacha v'chasidecha yevarchucha. Okay, so Hashem, all of your works are going to recognize you or will thank you. V'chasidecha yevarchucha. But your pious ones, your chasidim, they're going to bless you. So let's just take this word by word as we've been doing until now. So the concept of yoducha comes from the word modeh or todah, same shoresh. And of course, we know that todah means thank you. But before a person can properly give thanks, they have to be modeh, like we say every morning when we wake up, modeh or modah ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. I recognize, Hashem, that without you, shechazarta bi nishmati, right? Without you, who returned my soul into my body this morning, I wouldn't be here. So before we can say todah, we first have to say modeh. I get it, Hashem. I wouldn't be here without you. Modeh. I recognize, I acknowledge. And of course, those two things are linked, right? If we want to give appropriate thanks, we first have to recognize that someone has done something for us, that Hashem has done something for us. So the first thing that David HaMelech is telling us here is that all of Hashem's creations recognize him. And then the second thing he's telling us is the Hasidim among us are the ones who will bless him. So what's the difference? Who are the kol ma'asim? Again, we see the use of the word kol, and who are the Hasidim? So I saw this idea from, I believe, from Rav Hirsch, that the idea of all of the ma'asim of Hashem, who is that referring to? So the ma'asim of Hashem, those things that were formed, created by Hashem, so that could refer to any human being, right? We said kol ma'asim for sure. When we see the word kol, we know we're referring to all of humanity. It could also refer to the animal kingdom. It could refer to even aspects of nature, right? We have this idea, primarily we see it in Perek Shira, but we have this idea, and David HaMelech and Shlomo both tapped into this, that every piece of nature, every aspect of nature of Hashem's world has this song to sing. They have this role to play in the world. And when the tree gives its shade, which is fulfilling its role in this world, or one of its roles in this world, giving off carbon dioxide and all of those things as well. But when the tree is doing its job, that's its way of singing praise to Hashem. And we would say the same thing with the cat or the dog, and the same thing with the blade of grass or with the sun. All of the aspects of nature, their very existence is sort of a testimony, I would say, to the fact that Hashem is in charge. So Yoducha Hashem kol ma'asacha. But what's lacking here, and this is interesting, what's lacking here is that it's not by choice, really. In other words, Yoducha Hashem kol ma'asacha means, if you wouldn't be doing your job, right, you wouldn't be here anymore. It's sort of this involuntary, forced recognition that they were put on this planet by God himself. And so they have this inherent recognition that he's in charge. Now, halavai, right? If only every human being walked around literally feeling all day long that Hashem put them on this earth, or whatever God they believe in put them on this earth, this world would be a much better place. So I don't want to imply that this is so simple and basic, but the recognition that the average, unsophisticated person or irreligious person, non-spiritual person, or any aspect of nature, Rav Hirsch points out, it's not so much that they came to it intellectually, it just recognize that they're but what's different about Hasidim refer to any group of Jews in particular. How do we define a Hasid? So I saw a beautiful explanation, a definition, trying to from the Malbim. Malbim, I think people who go above and beyond, people who take every part of their lives and take up a notch, right? So they just go to shul and wholeheartedly into
Your sound is cutting out.
The sound is cutting out. We haven't got sound.
I think we lost her. I think she's.
Yeah, she was having trouble with her computer.
She'll come back.
Becky, did you get the email?
Pardon me?
Did you
What
get
email?
the email?
What email?
Uh-oh.
Woody, what are you talking about? What email?
An email for Razy.
No, not that I saw. Okay, I think Rebbitzon's back. We still don't hear her though. She has to unmute.
I'm so sorry about that. My internet went out, it seems. I apologize. Okay. I don't know how long I was talking to myself. And now I'm no longer the host. So let me see if I can fix that. Done. No, not letting me be the host anymore. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just go back to what we were talking about. I apologize. I'm not able to share my screen with you anymore. Okay. You'll just have to trust me that this is what the sources say. I'm not sure what happens when I got logged off and now it's not giving me that option. So I apologize. Okay. I'm not sure where I left off, where we got cut off. So I'm going to just take it from the idea of the Hasidim. The Hasidim are those, according to the Malbim, again, not a specific group of not stable. I'm going to try to join from my phone because I'm concerned that you guys.
No sound.
Okay. I'm going to leave my, all right. I'm just going to be on from my phone and hope that this works better. I apologize. I don't know. Okay. I'm not sure what is going on with my computer, but I'm now on 2 devices. No, that's not going to be good. Okay, is that better? All right, I apologize. I'm sorry. I put myself on 2 devices so that if we get stuck again, hopefully I'll just switch to the other one. So I apologize for that. Okay. Let's look at what we were up to, the Hasidim. Okay. The Hasidim are a group of people, according to the Malbim, who behave lifnim mishurat hadin. They are the people who go above and beyond, meaning that they are so committed. They are so committed, so excited, so involved that they are constantly going above and beyond. Okay, is that what happened? Someone else is listed as the host. Is that the problem? Okay, I can't figure this out. I'm not usually so inept when it comes to technology, but this is making me feel very not smart right now.
Continue, don't worry about it.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully you can all hear me. Please just let me know if you can't. I'm going to keep the chat open so that if anybody has anything to say, I will see it. Okay, so the Hasidim are those who the Hasidim are those who behave lifnim mishurat hadin. They go above and beyond. And therefore, they are functioning at a higher level, we'll say, than the typical ma'asim. Can you all still see me? Because I'm trying to share I'm looking at my source sheets. Okay. So they function at a different level, meaning everything that they do is with this sense of lifnim mishurat hadin, going above and beyond. And therefore, they're not just yoducha Hashem. They're not just recognizing that Hashem is the reason why they're on this earth. They are so above and beyond. They are so connected that they are capable of yivarchucha. They are capable of blessing Hashem. They're capable of acknowledging him with blessing. Now, this is fascinating. We spoke a little bit before in another class about the concept of bracha, and that whenever you see the language of bracha, it refers to the fact that whatever that is the source of something. In the case of Hashem, it's the source of everything. And that also when you see the language of bracha, we know that means it is the language of shefa, of a lot. It's much. Anytime you see the language of bracha, you know that it's almost like an overflow of whatever the item is. So in this case, chasidecha yevarchucha, those Hasidim, because they're always behaving and always functioning at this sort of more heightened level of sensitivity, Yivarchucha, they're in a constant state of recognizing that Hashem is the source of everything. So it's different than just acknowledging that he's there. It's a recognition that he is the source of all of the plenty. He's the source of everything, right? Not just he created the world or he put me here and that's why I'm here, but he is willing me continually into existence. I am still here. And so the fact that I am here, the fact that I'm about to say this bracha, the fact that I am able to get dressed this morning, the fact that I turn my car on and it starts, or in my case, open the garage door and the door actually opens. Those are all opportunities for a person who wants to function on the level of a chassid. Every single time there's an opportunity to recognize, oh, thank you, Hashem. Oh, that's a source. Hashem is the source of that. That only worked because Hashem willed it to work. And this concept of yivarchucha, so fascinating. I saw from the Minchat Shai, a beautiful, beautiful idea. And again, probably more Kabbalistic in nature. So I'm going to take it down to a level that I was able to understand it on. Yivarchu cha. He says, separate the two. Yivarchu kaf hey. Now, this could maybe be a connection to Hanukkah, which we know takes place on the Chaf Hey of Kislev, the 25th. But what I saw the Minchat Shai refer to is, you know how the Hasidim bless Hashem? They are Yivarchu Chaf Hey. The Yivarchu ko. Where do we know that word ko from? Chaf Hey. When Hashem gives when Hashem tells Abraham to go outside and look up at the stars, he says to him, ko yihiyeh zarecha, right? He gives him that bracha. He takes him outside, tells him to look up, he sees the stars, and he says to him, im tuchal lispor otam, vayomer lo, ko yihiyeh zarecha. This is how numerous your children are going to be. And of course, we look around at the Jewish people, or maybe Avraham at the time looked around and said, that seems kind of impossible, ko yihiyeh zarecha. At this point, right, he's got nobody. He doesn't have one biological descendant at this point. And so this notion of ko yihiyeh zarecha is the kind of bracha that is a recognition of the impossible is actually possible. When it's a bracha that recognizes that Hashem is the source, then ko is possible. Anything is possible. The idea that, okay, everyone, some of you are still not hearing me?
No, we hear you.
Hear me, okay. Okay, I just don't want there to be feedback. I'm not sure where my sound is coming from. Okay, so long as you can still hear me, I'm just wanted to check the chat. Okay. So that's the power of the word ko. It's recognizing yivarchu chafei. The Hasidim realize that there is nothing impossible when you connect yourself to Hashem. And I think that is just in many times in our lives, we need to hear this, but in particular now, I would say on an international human scale, we all need this reminder that when things seem so impossibly difficult and like there is no end in sight, but yivarchu ko, yivarchu cha, Hashem, we recognize you can do anything. And as much as we believe that science is real and nature is real, we believe that Hashem is behind it all. And so the fact that there could be a vaccine, whether we're going to have access to it so soon or not is a different story. But the fact that we believe that Hashem is allowed such a thing to happen in such an unprecedented amount of time, and the fact that things look bleak now, but by tomorrow or by 5 p.m. or whenever someone decides to make an announcement, we could be hearing something totally different. Anything is possible. When you think, Ko yihiyeh zarecha, Hashem gave Avraham a bracha that his children were going to number the stars. And he didn't have one descendant at the time. So that's just something that we can keep in mind as we say this pasuk, Yoducha Hashem kol ma'asecha. All of your creatures recognize that you're the reason they were put here in the first place. But we want to be the Hasidim. We want to be Chasidecha. We want to be your Hasidim that are Yivarchu Chafei, that are able to bless you with this notion of with you, everything is possible and nothing is impossible. Okay, let's move on to Kavod Malchutcha, okay, the letter Chaf. Kavod Malchutcha Yomeru ugevuratcha yedaberu. The Kavod, the honor of your Malchut, of your kingship or your kingdom, Yomeru, they will say, ugevuratcha yedaberu, and your greatness, your acts of mightiness, they will declare. So you'll notice, of course, the last pasuk, we were speaking directly to Hashem, Yoducha Hashem kol ma'asecha, your creatures. Here again, we're saying to Hashem, Kavod Malchutcha, your kingdom, right, is going to be spoken about, and your great deeds, your mightiness is going to be declared. We've mentioned before the idea of Yomeru versus Yedaberu. Yomeru is sort of a softer kind of speech. Yedaberu is more chazak. It's a stronger type of expression, which makes sense because when you think about the Malchut of Hashem, that's like a little bit vague, right? It's like the idea that Hashem is in charge of everything. Okay, very nice. I could talk about that. But ugvuratcha yedaberu, your gevura, your mightiness, your awesomeness, that I say with perhaps just a little bit more strength, because those are things maybe I could like sink my teeth into a little bit more. I see your mighty acts, right? I see how you express yourself in nature, or I see the miraculous events that you bring into this world, the, unbelievable experiences that we are able to study about in the Torah, or maybe we're even, keyed in and we can see them in our day-to-day lives. So sometimes a little easier to tap into those, the gevurot, the idea of Hashem's gevura. Let's just talk about this notion of malchut. We'll talk about it here because it's going to repeat itself in 2 psukim. So the idea of malchut is that this is in particular like something we speak about often in the month of Elul leading up to Rosh Hashanah, and certainly during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the idea of Hashem being a melech. And of course, we know we've been comparing really throughout Ashrei, the idea that Hashem is a king, but he's not quite like the kings we're familiar with. Not that you and I are so familiar with kings. These days, that's not something we are so accustomed to, the notion of a powerful, basar vadam king, a king of flesh and blood. But David HaMelech is particular, which of course is fascinating because he himself is a melech and he wrote this. He is it's very common for him to draw distinctions between the malchut of Hashem and the malchut of a human being, right? We know that there were some very human things about David HaMelech. He was extraordinary in so many ways, and he made mistakes because he's a human being, and that's what mistakes do. That's also a theme in Ashrei as it is in much of Tehilim. So the idea of the malchut of Hashem being something that is on another level than any other malchut, and the idea that there's only one, right? In no other place can you talk about like malchutcha, and you're so sure you know what you're talking about, because the kingdom of any other flesh and blood king, you got to be a little bit more descriptive. Where does it begin and where does it end? Which countries are you referring to? When you talk about the malchut of Hashem, it is all encompassing. The malchut of Hashem that's the entire universe. The world is his malchut. And so the kavod of his malchut, we are yomeru, they will talk about. Ugvuratcha yidaberu. In particular, many of the commentaries point out, I just want to say that this is a continuation of the last pasuk. The last pasuk ended with the Hasidim giving bracha. So many of the Mefarshim point out the Hasidim, they're really the best ones to also talk about kavod malchutcha and Gevorah yedaberu. They're really the best equipped, meaning the average person, we're good at, a couple times a day when we daven, or maybe when we say a bracha, or maybe, if we're learning a little bit of Torah during the day, that's when we tend to tap into this idea of the Malchut of Hashem. But the Hasidim, who we know are lifnim mishurat hadin, they are always looking for ways to connect to Hashem. They're looking for ways to express their connection to Hashem. Their notion that everything he does is possible, or that he is capable of doing anything and everything and nothing is impossible. Those Hasidim, they're really the right ones. They're the ones who are going to be able to describe the Malchut of Hashem, because that is such a lofty, big notion. They're going to be the ones who are able to do that. And of course, as well, to recognize his Gevorah as well. Okay, let's go on to Pasuk Lamed. Or I should say, the pasuk that begins with Lamed. Lehodia livnei ha'adam gevurotav uchvod hadar malchuto. To reveal to bnei ha'adam, humanity, to men, his mighty acts, his gevurot, uchvod hadar malchuto. And again, the glorious splendor of his kingship. You will notice that these three psukim, and I apologize that I can't share my screen with you. I keep checking, but it's not letting me do it. These three verses are very, very much linked. The idea of kavod and malchut repeat themselves in these three psukim, in the pasuk of kavod malchutcha, lahodia, and malchutcha, malchut kolamim. The idea of kingship, of kingdom, keeps repeating itself, as well as the idea of Gevorah and kavod. All of those things are repetitive ideas in these psukim. And here we're talking about lahodia livnei ha'adam, to let humanity know. Meaning, even though we have said before, inherently, anybody that's on this earth could realize that that's how they got here, but there might be some people who aren't aware. So lahodia livnei ha'adam tells us that's the goal also of these Hasidim. They're going to talk about your Malchut. They're going to talk about your Gevorah. And of course, the goal is that we become the Hasidim. We're not trying to talk about a group of people that lives in another neighborhood and does their own thing. We want to be those people. We want to be those people who recognize the glorious kingdom that is Hashem's. We want to be the people who are Yivarchucha, who are able to recognize that nothing is impossible for Hashem. So this is for us, Lahodia livnei ha'adam. We have this obligation to tell people, to let the world know Gevurotav, his tremendous strength, uchvod hadar malchuto, and the gloriousness, the beauty of his kingdom. And one thing you'll notice, of course, is the shift. We went from speaking directly to Hashem it's called second person, and now we are talking about him in third person. There was a shift. So we'll talk about that when we shift back to second person, okay? But just to pay attention that that's something that took place here. How does this happen? What does that look like? Lahodia livnei hadam gevurotav. So this could be referring to the fact that we have an obligation to let everybody know that Hashem is so great and he does this incredible things. You could also read this pasuk to say that Hashem himself is lehodia livnei ha'adam. He's showing us. He is the one. Oh, it's telling me I'm unstable again. I hope I'm going to stay on. He is the one who is telling us that our kingdom, his kingdom is so mighty, is so strong. We're showing us, right? Wait, yeah. Just tell the world to Hashem, that he should make it easier for us to spread the word, or he himself spread the word. Okay, I switched to my phone because I see my computer disappeared. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to just do this instead. Let me just prop my phone up so that it stays. Here we go. Okay, we'll finish up. I apologize for all the technical difficulties. This is, I guess, just par for the course these days. Let me see what I can prop my phone. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's the letter Lamed. Let's try to get through at least Mem. Maybe even we'll do the next two. Malchutcha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha bechol dor vador. We said before we're going to see this notion of malchut, and here it is again. The idea that Hashem's kingdom is a kingdom like no other. And in this particular pasuk, malchutcha malchut kol olamim, your kingdom is a kingdom of all of the worlds. What does that mean? Umemshaltecha b'chol dor vador, and your governance or your rulership exists b'chol dor vador, in every single generation. So first we have to see what is the difference between a malchut and a memshala. We have to understand what is this kol alamim. There's more than one world. What is this talking about? So let's take it piece by piece. So the idea of malchut versus the idea of memshala. So a melech is a king because he is declared king by his subjects, right? So we have this notion of ein melech below am. There's no such thing as a king if he doesn't have a nation. So a relationship where we have a king and we are the subjects, so that implies there's a lot of connection, right? I have a king, he cares about me, I pay him taxes, but I pay him taxes and in turn, he looks out for me, he looks out for my best interest. The difference between a melech and a moshel, or memshala, which of course is the modern day word for government. So this is an apolitical statement. I'm talking about it from the terms of Tanakh, that a moshel is different than a melech. A moshel is somebody who rules by force. And we do not have the same expectation of a moshel that we do of a melech. A moshel is much more, he's only concerned about keeping himself or herself in power. And so there's no concern about the subjects. The only concern is, like, are they trying to kill me or not? Are they trying to take away my power or not? And so the ideal is for a person to get to the level where they view Hashem as a melech, not as a moshel. And we recognize that this isn't so simple. It's not simple for any of us. It's certainly not simple if you haven't been raised on these ideas as a member of the Jewish people. And so it's possible to relate to Hashem as a moshel, but chaval, what a shame to relate to him that way. That's not the kind of ruler that he is. And now David HaMelech is going to give us a number of examples where we see he's a melech. He cares so much about his people. It's important to him that we are satisfied and happy. It's more of a symbiotic relationship. Now, this sounds a little bit crazy to say about Hashem because we know Hashem doesn't need anything. But if you could make the argument that Hashem has one thing that he needs, it would be, in order to be a king, you have to have subjects who recognize you as such. So it's a little bit of a complicated sort of philosophical notion, but we'll just say that the idea of a melech implies more connection. When I teach Sefer Melachim in high school, so one of the things that we spend time on in my introduction is we talk about the concept of a melech, like why did we end up with a melech as a Jewish people? Was that plan A or was it only plan B? So we spend quite a bit of time talking about that. One of the sources that I happened upon in my preparations to learn about the concept of a melech is the idea that a melech is Rashi Tevot. It's an acronym for Moach, Lev, and Klayot. The idea that a king has a brain, a heart, and kidneys. So all healthy human beings are blessed with these organs. So what does it mean that a melech is an acronym for these three parts of the body? So I'd say the more Kabbalistic of the Mefarshim explain the expectation of a melech is that he is constantly trying to control his moach, his lev, and his klayot. That he is trying always to recognize and think about the fact that he was put on this earth to serve the people that he was put here, but Hashem is above him. So that's what he uses his head for. And he's trying always his entire life to maintain control of his mind. He's trying to maintain control of his heart, of his feelings, not to get overly angry, not to get overly frustrated, not to take things personally. He's constantly working on himself, on his emotions. And klayot refers to specifically, usually, the sexual urges or sexual drives that any human being has, but in particular for a king, a person who is in such a position of control and power, that there's an expectation that he will learn to control that part of himself as well. Whereas in all three areas, we recognize all human beings have challenges. It's hardly because you're the king that now all of a sudden you have these challenges. We all have to learn to gain control over our minds, our hearts, and our inner yearnings and desires. But when it's the king, so the stakes are so high. We have this idea that the Rambam shares that the Lev HaMelech who Lev Kol Kahal Yisrael, that the heart of the king and the heart of the Jewish people are so wound and tied to each other that if the king falls in any one of these areas, it's going to affect the people. There's this like almost the way they talk about twins, how like a twin, twins who are separated, that one will experience a pain and then the other somehow like feels something is off. That's the connection that we understand exists between the king and the Jewish people. So if that's true between us and a king of flesh and blood, how much more so is there a connection between us and our king of kings, right? A melech who feels everything we feel, who is there with us through everything, and who frankly has, if he has a need, he has a need for us to proclaim him as our king. That is what it means to have a melech. And so, of course, we're always wanting to develop this relationship with Hashem. When we say, Malchutcha, Malchut Kol Olamim, Hashem, I want to relate to you as a melech. I want you to be my king. If we do this every day, 3 times a day, by the time we get to Elul and Rosh Hashanah, piece of cake. We'll be ready to make Hashem our king the way that we're supposed to during that time of year, because we'll have been working on it all the time. What is this concept of Kol Olamim, all of the worlds? What does that mean? So there are a lot of different explanations. It maybe refers to other planets. It maybe refers to Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba, right? Hashem, you are in charge of it all. It's all part of your kingdom. There's also this idea that I think is just interesting I'll share Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch explains that this refers to the fact that for the Melech, for Hashem himself, there's no past, present, or future. It's all the same. For us, like when I'm in a situation, halavai, we should all be so present when we're present. But he makes the point that for the average human being, at best, they are present. But when the past is over, they're no longer there. And the future hasn't happened yet. The only way that we connect to it often is by worrying about it, which is not what Hashem does. It's all seamless. Malchutcha malchut kol amim means Hashem sees it all at the same time, right? He understands why things have to be the way they are because of what's going to happen. Because for him, there's no past, present, future. It's all one time. Finally, I want to share another idea about this idea of malchutcha malchut kol olamim, all the worlds. What worlds? So there's a famous midrash, a few famous midrashim actually, that take us back to the creation of the world, as we had discussed a little bit earlier in the class. The idea that when Hashem originally created the world, it was not his first try. The midrash talks about how Hashem was borei, I think the language is hores olamot. He created worlds and then he destroyed them. Created another one, destroyed another one, until he finally got to the point where he said, oh, now I got it right. There's another midrash that says something similar, that initially Hashem created the world with midat hadin. He only used the language of Bereshit bara Elokim, et hashamayim bet haaretz. And what you notice, if you read through the first parak of Bereshit, that's the name of Hashem that's used. When you get to the second parak, so you realize, Shem Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei, the language of mercy, of compassion. The midrash tells us that initially Hashem thought, I'm going to make a world where the people, they just get it. They just do the right thing. And so I'm going to create a world with din, with justice. And then he saw fairly quickly that wasn't going to work out so well. So he redid things and added the element of rachamim to his creation. Now, what do all these ideas mean? That Hashem created worlds and then he destroyed them? Or that Hashem created with one midah and then decided, that's not going to work. Let me make a change. What are we meant to learn from this? Rav Soloveitchik very famously says, this is not a reflection of any kind of imperfection of Hashem himself, right? He could have gotten it right the first time, But Hashem, who is Tov, who is good and is always looking to give and to teach and to model for us our, best behavior, the reason why these ideas exist, or the reason why they're actually, if we want to take them literally, why they're actually true, is in order to let us know that it's okay to make a mistake. And that provided you try again, that's the piece that matters, right? In other words, when we study these midrashim, we're meant to think, that's funny. What would have happened if Hashem gave up after like the third world and it didn't work out so well? What would have happened? We wouldn't be here. What would have been if Hashem would have said, no, I said it's going to be the Midat Hadin and I'm not changing it? Well, none of us would have lasted very long, right? So this idea of flexibility, of resilience, of just because it didn't work out the first time doesn't mean I can't try again. Or just because this really isn't going the way that I wanted it to go, we don't just have to keep continuing to let it go. This is a big debate in my house. What do you do when you're watching a movie or, you've bought food and you're not happy with it, right? You paid money for the movie, or you paid money for the food in the Halacha, in the restaurant, or the Uber Eats that was delivered to your house. What do you do about it now? If you're really not enjoying the movie, or if you're really not enjoying the food, do you just keep at it because you already committed to it? I already spent the money, so I need to get my money's worth. One of my family members says, it's not bad enough that I spent the money. Now I also have to waste the rest of my night watching a movie I'm not enjoying, right? Or it's not bad enough I spent money on food that I don't like. Now I have to eat it. I have to suffer double. So one could argue this is a little bit the approach that Hashem is trying to teach us. You can shift midstream. Just because you started one way doesn't mean you can't make a change. Machutcha machut kol olamim. Hashem is the king of all the worlds. He's the king that says, it's okay. You tried one, didn't work out, try the next one. You think it's going well, but then it turns out it's not going so well. No problem. Change gears in the middle. It's fine. We always say, like, it wasn't written in blood. You could take it back, right? Change whatever you need to change in order to accomplish what you need to accomplish. That is one of the lessons that Hashem teaches us with Machutcha, or I should say David HaMelech teaches us about trying to be more godly with Machutcha machut kol olamim. Finally, this idea that the kingdom of Hashem, the governance of Hashem, is b'chol dor vador. Meaning every generation, it's actually the same. We don't always perceive it that way. We often look at the generation before us and say, oh my gosh, how did they handle that? Or wow, they had it way easier than we did, right? I think it's sort of split depending on which direction you're looking and who you are, whether the grass is greener or not. Or we might look at the generation younger than us and say, wow, I don't know how they're managing, or they have it so much easier than we do, right? Usually people feel one way or the other. But Memshaltecha b'chol dor vador tells us, even if our perception is that things have changed from generation to generation, the one thing that never changes is the fact that Hashem is in charge. Hashem is in charge. Memshaltecha b'chol dor vador, that Hashem's rulership exists in every generation. I feel bad we didn't cover as much as I wanted to cover because of our technical difficulties. So maybe I'll just squeeze in one more pasuk. Of course, if you have to leave, please feel free to leave. I'm going to finish by one, but my goal is really to make this year less than an hour. But because we had a little bit of trouble, I'll just push it a little bit more. If you want to stay, great. If not, please feel free to move on with your day. Okay. Einei chol elecha yisaberu va'ata noten lahem et achlam be'ito. The letter ayin. I know what I'll do. Before we get, I skipped something. Mem. Nun. Yes. I went straight to, I skipped nun and zamach. Okay, let's talk about that first. This is what happens when I can't use my screen. The letter nun is missing. That is one of the first things that everybody recognizes when they study and they learn Ashrei. And we talked about this at the very beginning in the introduction to our shiur. A couple of weeks ago, we spoke about the fact that this is an acrostic. It has all the letters of the alphabet, but one letter is missing. The letter nun is missing. And there's a very famous Gemara that says, well, would not be appropriate to talk about nifilah, to talk about falling in a perek that is describing the greatness of Hashem and the power of Hashem, his mightiness, his kingdom, all of these things. Shame. We should have mentioned something so negative called nif, with a nun. which is just an interesting idea. And maybe I'll leave you with this. The idea that the letter Nun is associated with Nifilah, when it could just as easily have been associated with Nisim, right? Something positive like miracles, or could have been associated with Nasa, to carry or to travel. There are so many other words that are associated with the letter Nun. So what was this concern? So the Gemara tells us that there is a pasuk in Amos that describes a particular fall of the Jewish people. It talks about how the women of Bnei Israel, that they sinned, and it was bad. It was really bad. And the pasuk itself is subject to much debate. If we can add a little bit of a positive twist to it, because it's inherently so negative when it talks about the fall of the Jewish people. And so David HaMelech, according to Rav Hirsch, he didn't want to bring into a parak of Tehilim that talks about ways where we could be more godly, where we could be more like Hashem himself, that are reflecting the midot of Hashem, that describes in the Gemara, the way it's described is that it's associated with human failing. Because this is not a parak that talks about people. This is a parak that talks about how we can be more like God. And so to add in such a negative idea would take away from this, tremendous amount of praise that we are doing in this parak of Ashrei. And instead, what we notice, and the Gemara points out, and I apologize, I can't share this with you on my screen, but what the Gemara points out for us is, instead, David HaMelech, he wants to include the idea of falling. So he does it in the next pasuk. So mech Hashem lechol hanoflim. Hashem gives support to all those who fall. And that's what we'll pick up with next time. We'll speak a little bit more about who are these noflim? Who are the people that are falling? Or did they fall already? Are they currently falling? Who is this referring to? We're going to see that it's about us. It's 100% talking about us today. So we'll pick up with that next time. But just this idea that David HaMelech didn't want to include the nifilah, the falling, in these verses, in these beautiful psukim that are describing the greatness of Hashem, his kingdom, his majesty, all of this, that we're going to talk about it, but in a little bit more of an indirect way. So that's why the letter Nun is missing. But we will pick up with the concept of what does it mean to fall? How does it feel to be falling? In what ways does Hashem help us when we're falling, or if we have already fallen? That is what we will pick up with next time. And I look forward to seeing you all then. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for being here. And again, apologies for the issues with the technology.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rebbetzin.
Thank you. So nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I always appreciate that you take time out of your day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's a privilege.
Oh, thank you for